From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Monday, September 1, 2025. A big power shift in the Middle East, with Israel wiping out the senior leadership of Houthi rebels who've been attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea and firing ballistic missiles at Israeli cities. But Anthony Albanese's government has stopped short of explicitly supporting Israel's actions in eliminating the senior Houthis, who are Iran's last terror proxy in the Middle East and who'd survived an onslaught from the United States earlier this year. Today, Chief International Correspondent Cameron Stewart joins me to discuss exactly how Mossad did the job. They call it Operation Drop of Luck. Israeli fighter jets fly over the 2,000-year-old mountain valley city of Sana'a in Yemen and drop bombs on a fuel depot and a leadership compound, where the top officials of the Houthi rebel government are meeting to watch a televised broadcast by their leader, Abdel Malek al-Houthi. He's in hiding, reportedly in a cave somewhere in the mountains, communicating with Yemenis via weekly video messages. A fireball blooms into the sky, the jets are gone, and a city reels from what will turn out to be a devastating moment.
This is by far the most successful strike against the Houthi leadership ever conducted.
Cameron Stewart is The Australian's chief international correspondent, and we're talking about the fresh revelation that this Israeli attack, conducted last Thursday, took out the Houthis' self-proclaimed Prime Minister, Ahmed al-Rahawi, and members of his cabinet, including the Cabinet Secretary, Foreign Minister, Justice Minister, and several more.
It shows that Israel is changing its strategy and its tactics in dealing with the Houthis, which of course are the last of the Iranian proxy terror groups that are still effective enough to actually, or brave enough, should we say, or crazy enough to actually lob missiles towards Israel.
Just days ago, the Houthis, whose slogan is "Death to America, Death to Israel, Curse the Jews," were celebrating ballistic missile attacks on Israeli cities. They were a devilishly difficult nut to crack, this rebel force that has taken over northern Yemen with money and weapons funnelled in by Iran and has been causing mayhem across the Middle East and around the world for 2 years. The Houthis have had an outsized impact on world politics, haven't they? They control northern Yemen, basically. They're a rebel force. But they, through their control of the Red Sea, were able to disrupt shipping and change the world's economy.
That's right. I mean, because they're so strategically located there, and they are quite. They've got quite a lot of missiles supplied often by Iran and by Hezbollah, and they fired missiles at those ships in the Red Sea in the early stages of the Gaza war with massive success in the sense that they didn't sink many.
This is a social media video released by the Houthis showing the seizure of a bulk carrier, the Magic Seas, 2 months ago.
Mayday, mayday, mayday! This is motor vessel Magic Seas, Delta 5.
But they actually scared the shipping companies for insurance reasons, safety reasons, etc., not to take the route. And of course that required them to go a very long route around Africa, very expensive, affected the whole trading economy of the world, affected world markets as well. So for a small little rebel force, they really caused a lot of trouble there. And of course, this actually led, you might recall, in March this year to Donald Trump taking on the Houthis because he got sick of American ships having to go the long way around. And he took them on and said, we're going to take the fight to you, which the Israelis were very happy about. And yet, only months later, in early May, Trump struck a deal with the Houthis, basically, that said, well, we're going to stop bombing you so long as you stop firing on American ships. So that was the deal he made. And I think that really shows, Claire, how difficult it is to destroy the Houthis. I mean, if the Americans, with all their intelligence and targeted missiles and resources, cannot knock off this group, then that says a lot about the resilience of them.
The Houthis were organised and well armed enough to be firing ballistic missiles at Israel. Israel has struck back after learning that some of their leadership was going to be gathered together watching an address by the Houthis' leader. This strategy of taking out senior leadership, is that what's different about the way Israel has done it this time?
Yes, definitely. They haven't done that. Previously, they've been attacking energy centres to try and damage the power of the Houthis and also upset the civilian population and make the Houthis lose local support. This is a very different strategy, and it's precisely what the Israelis did with great effect against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Of course, they assassinated the long-standing Hezbollah leader, Nasrallah, as well as all of his deputies. And effectively, they defeated Hezbollah as a result of this because the head was chopped off the Hezbollah dragon. And of course, in Gaza, we had Yahya Sinwar, who was killed, and all of the senior Hamas commanders have pretty much been killed. And while Israel hasn't subjugated Hamas entirely, they've certainly dismembered them as a coherent military force. And lastly, of course, Iran. We had Israel having targeted strikes. It killed actually Hamas's political leader in Tehran, you recall, but also in this last strike, they killed an enormous amount of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps senior leaders and also some nuclear scientists. And while they didn't kill the supreme leader, it has certainly cowed Iran as far as Iran's belligerence goes. So this has been an effective tactic for Israel with the other proxies in the region, and that's clearly what they've decided to do against the Houthis.
The connection between all these strikes, led by Israeli spy agency Mossad, is human intelligence. Their agents got pagers and then walkie-talkies to Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon and then exploded them to devastating effect. Then Israeli operatives in Iran coordinated the destruction of nuclear sites. And now Israel's spies knew when and where the Houthi leadership were going to be and called in the airstrikes.
Mossad is by far the most sophisticated, technically, manpower-wise. They also have a lot of assets on the ground. And what actually happened, interestingly, with this attack with the Houthis was the Israelis, it shows their sophistication. They actually did a couple of ruses to give the Houthis some sense of comfort that they weren't being watched and they weren't actually being tracked. And that's what led these Houthi leaders to actually make the rather foolish decision to meet together, reportedly to watch the address by their supreme leader. And, that's a very vulnerable situation, and that's where the bomb hit. And that's why you've got not only the PM getting killed, but some other members of his cabinet as well.
It hasn't been a good week for Iran. Of course, their ambassador to Australia was expelled and sent home, and now the federal government is preparing to proscribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, blaming them for anti-Semitic attacks conducted here in Australia. There had been calls for a long time for the federal government here in Australia to proscribe the IRGC camp, but it's not the only terror group that there are calls about, is there? What else is going on?
Yes, well, the revelation, Claire, that the Revolutionary Guard Corps had ordered these two anti-Semitic attacks against the restaurant in Sydney and the Adas synagogue here in Melbourne, as well as other ones, I believe, has really sort of sparked extra alarm beyond the Revolutionary Guard Corps. And the Zionist Federation of Australia told me on Friday that they were very concerned about Hizbat ul Tahrir, HUT, it's better known as, and that is a Sunni extremist organisation. It's a global organisation, and they espouse much of the same extremism as Iran does. They hate Israel, they glorified Hamas, they want a caliphate, and they were very central in organising pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli street protests, both in the cities here in Australia and also on the university campuses here in Australia. And what they tend to do is they just fall short of completely advocating violence, which makes it very difficult for ASIO under the legislation to declare them a terrorist outfit. But what the ZFA said to me was, look, we need to be more proactive here. This is clearly a group that is hostile to the Jewish community. We think they should be proscribed. And that's, I think, a debate that's going to happen inside government. The government has not confirmed whether they will have that debate, but I really think that they probably will now. That's going to be another issue. And that's come about really because everyone was so surprised, they probably shouldn't have been, but everyone was so surprised that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps had actually ordered these attacks.
The Netanyahu government has significantly weakened Iran, but could the Iranians still make a nuclear weapon? That's after the break. There are reports over the weekend that Israel is preparing to limit aid supplies to northern Gaza in preparation for a new onslaught. We've been talking for a while about the preparations to take over Gaza City. Benjamin Netanyahu is ploughing on despite international criticism, Cam, of the way he's conducted the war in Gaza. In a couple of decades from now, how do you think we'll look back on Netanyahu given his undoubted success in weakening Iran and its proxies?
That's a great question. I mean, I think Netanyahu's legacy will be very mixed, and a lot of people will see it entirely through their own prism. He'll be a Churchillian hero to some. He'll be a war criminal to others. I think probably when history settles, and of course we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Netanyahu, with Gaza and with the whole region. It's still very much a work in progress, of course. But I think what people will see from Netanyahu, as far as the negatives go, will be flaws in his conduct of the operation in Gaza, his inability to fully destroy Hamas. It's certainly at an acceptable cost of civilian lives. We've had an enormous amount of civilian deaths. I think we've had some unnecessary cruelty and poor decisions on the part of the Israeli government during the conflict in Gaza. I think he will be criticised for many aspects of that. But on the other side, Netanyahu has presided over a huge strategic victory for Israel in the region. I mean, we are talking historic strategic victory here. Israel is a lot safer now than it was on October 7, 2023, and you can really argue that in lots of ways the world is safer. So Netanyahu has a mixed legacy, massive strategic victory in the region for Israel against those countries and those groups that want to destroy Israel, a very mixed record in Gaza.
And Cam, do you think we're any closer to knowing the truth about whether the strikes on Iran's nuclear capability actually worked, actually disrupted their progress towards acquiring a nuclear weapon?
We are finding out some things, Claire, but it's still very unclear. And of course, you know, intelligence is never perfect. Look at the WMD debate in Iraq many years ago. But what it looks like is that it caused severe destruction and devastation, but didn't knock the nuclear facilities out entirely. The bombs certainly didn't go right to the very bottom of those facilities. They are still in some form existing, but they don't seem to be operational in any way. And interestingly, we haven't heard much about the Iranians trying to repair those facilities because, of course, those facilities are vulnerable to renewed strikes by the Israelis and perhaps even the Americans should the Iranians try to reconstitute them. And that would be something which would become fairly visible to Israeli intelligence. So that's really a story to watch because we haven't seen the Iranians doing that. And it does raise the question as to how determined they may or may not be to reconstitute those facilities and put themselves once again in the eyesights of the target sites of Israel.
Cameron Stewart is the Australian's chief international correspondent. You can read our ongoing reporting about the conflict in the Middle East right now at theaustralian.com.au.